At the start of the story, John Kralik is not in a good place. He's a struggling lawyer in Los Angeles, newly divorced, in a failing relationship, overweight, and living in a small, dingy apartment. His law firm is close to collapse. His ex-wife is angry with him, and he's estranged from one of his sons. It's just after Christmas, and despite the festive season, he feels no joy. In his words, he believes he is failing at life. On New Year's Day, Kralik goes for a solitary hike in the mountains. Feeling desperate, he begins reflecting on what went wrong. On that quiet, cold morning, a thought surfaces: what if he focused on what he has rather than what he lacks? What if he tried to be thankful, even for small things? The idea isn't grand. It's simple and strange. But something about it sticks. He decides, perhaps irrationally, that he will write 365 thank you notes over the course of the next year. He begins tentatively. The first note goes to his oldest son, who had given him a Christmas gift. It's awkward and emotional, but sincere. Then he writes a note to a colleague who referred a client. Slowly, he continues. Some people respond, some don't. But a quiet rhythm begins to form in his life. Each note grounds him. Each note forces him to reflect. Over time, it becomes more than a project, it becomes a lifeline. Kralik's thank you notes are not grand gestures. They're often about tiny things: a cup of coffee, a kind word, someone simply doing their job well. But the impact is surprisingly deep. He finds himself observing his world differently, scanning for good instead of bad. What he once took for granted, his assistant's reliability, his daughter's smile, his favorite barista, becomes a source of strength. One of the most moving parts of the book is how this gratitude begins to heal his broken relationships. His daughter, who used to seem distant and disinterested, begins to open up when she sees her father paying attention. He writes her thank you notes for the small ways she brings light into his life. She responds with warmth and affection. Gratitude, it turns out, softens distance. It builds bridges. Even his ex-wife, once unreachable, begins to shift subtly when she receives a note of appreciation. Professionally, things begin to shift as well. He writes to clients, to judges, to coworkers. People start responding in kind. New referrals come in. Old clients return. His firm, once floundering, starts to stabilize. He realizes something powerful: gratitude makes him more present and more respectful. People feel that. They trust him more because he sees them, not just as a means to an end, but as people who matter. The practice even affects his physical habits. Writing thank you notes requires slowing down. Sitting. Reflecting. Focusing. That mindfulness spills into other parts of his life. He begins walking more, eating better, feeling more alert. The weight he'd carried, both physical and emotional, starts to lessen. The act of gratitude becomes a kind of self-care. There are setbacks. Some days, he forgets to write a note. Other times, he can't think of anyone to thank. And sometimes, he wonders if the whole thing is pointless. But those are the days he pushes through. Writing a note when he feels least thankful, he says, often becomes the most powerful moment of his day. Gratitude is not always natural, it has to be chosen. As the year progresses, his notes take on deeper layers. He thanks former teachers, old friends, people he once wronged. These letters bring emotional risk. Sometimes they go unanswered. But sometimes, they lead to remarkable reconnections. One friend who had fallen out of touch responds with her own letter. An old mentor calls and they speak for the first time in decades. These exchanges don't just mend old wounds, they restore parts of Kralik's identity he thought were lost. He also begins receiving thank you notes in return. These surprises touch him deeply. It's as if gratitude, once released, doesn't stop. It circulates. It comes back in unexpected forms: a job opportunity, a compliment from a stranger, a peaceful morning. The practice has trained him to see the world differently. Gratitude, he learns, makes the invisible visible. The ritual of writing becomes sacred. He starts carrying note cards with him. Sometimes he writes in coffee shops, sometimes on court benches, sometimes in bed. Each note becomes a small meditation. A chance to pause, to connect, to witness the good. Over time, it becomes as vital to him as food or sleep. Perhaps the most powerful shift is internal. Where he once saw scarcity, he now sees abundance. His life hasn't become perfect, he still struggles with bills, relationships, and personal doubts, but the lens through which he views it has changed. The world hasn't improved so much as his ability to find what's worthwhile in it. In the final chapters, he reflects on how the year has changed him. Writing 365 thank you notes did not fix every problem. But it made him more generous, more centered, and more open to life's surprises. He feels less like a man being pushed by circumstances and more like someone living with intention. Gratitude, he concludes, did not solve his life. But it gave him back his agency, and, quietly, joy. The book ends not with a grand summary, but with a simple reminder: you don't have to wait until things are better to be thankful. Gratitude doesn't follow happiness. It leads to it. Writing thank you notes taught him that every day offers a gift. If you pause long enough to say thank you. That's the quiet revolution of gratitude. It doesn't change the world, but it changes how you move through it. And sometimes, that's enough.